Inspired Coach podcast and our very first episode for 2024. Happy New Year to you. You know, honestly, saying that year, 2024, actually blows my mind a little bit. As a child that was born in the 70s, bell-bottoms, flares, disco. Honestly, I can hardly believe that we are in 2024. I hope that whatever it is that the new year has brought for you so far and what you're dreaming about for the year ahead is feeling lush and promising and wonderful for you. Thank you so much for being back on the airwaves with us. If you are a regular listener and you first joined us when Inspired Coach launched in 2023, or welcome to you if you are brand new to this podcast and our sharings about coaching business through this medium. It's wonderful to have you here. And I am very excited to begin our episodes this year. It just so happens that it falls in the order. For those of you who are already connected to us, you will know that we have 3 types of episodes here at Inspired Coach. One is an inspirational interview. The other is a success story. And another, again, is the Coach's Couch, where I answer your questions that you want to put forward for me to speak to on the podcast, or I share a solo episode on the couch with you. And this one today happens to be a wonderful question, and it's no coincidence then that it comes from a wonderful coach by the name of Ketsi Mulcahy. You can find Ketsi at Coaching with Ketsi. That's KHETSI.com, coachingwithketsi.com. And you will also find her on Instagram under that same handle, Coaching with Ketsi. And this is Ketsi's question. When and how did you start doing the work around equity, diversity, and inclusion? What called you to look at this? Oh, Ketsi, thank you for this question. And there are 2 places really that I could start in answering this. One is a little further along and only to do with the Beautiful You Coaching Academy. And one is a little bit more personal that started way before then. And it influences heavily everything that has taken place in the Beautiful You Coaching Academy. And so I feel like we need to begin at that much earlier one. And so I think it's relevant for me to share with all of you, and some of you may know this about me as the founder of the Academy and my personal story, and others of you may not, but I grew up on a farm in a very rural area. So when I say farm, I mean you looked out and all you saw was land. You couldn't see any other houses. It was definitely rural. It wasn't regional or just like a country town. We were in a rural area. The nearest town of about 1,500 people was 20 minutes drive away, and that's where I went to school. And like many rural areas in Australia, it was incredibly white. And there were very, very few, and in fact, in my immediate orbit, no people of colour that surrounded me as I was growing up at all. There were no people of colour in my graduating class at school. Mind you, there was only 14 of us because I went to a tiny country high school. It was very white, incredibly white. And so this was the fishbowl that I grew up in. And I think that this is an important thing to share because I was not someone that was surrounded by diversity of people, cultures, religions, races, and experiences until I went to university when I was 18. And I left home. I had to leave home, of course, to be able to go to university, coming where I did. And I stayed on campus, worked 3 to 4 jobs at varying different times throughout my years at university to support me to be able to do that. And it was then that I had my first significant experience of being around people of different backgrounds, mostly who came from Southeast Asia. There were many students from China, Vietnam, Cambodia, India, Sri Lanka, who came to study overseas in Australia. And we lived together along with many different people of many different cultures and races, including many white students as well from Aussie backgrounds, on campus together. And honestly, it was one of the most wonderful times of my life. I made friends with many different people from these different backgrounds. I learned to cook some amazing food, eat and cook some amazing food that I'd never been taught before. And it was a really amazing and wonderful time. And it was something that felt, even though I had not grown up with people of different backgrounds, it felt just very natural and comfortable for me. And I loved getting to know people who were very different to me. By the time I graduated after my 2 degrees, I moved to Melbourne and I began working in an area of Melbourne that was incredibly multicultural. It was not an area that was economically strong. It was a poor area with a lot of people who were struggling financially, who had intergenerational poverty, who were refugees, many from a variety of different countries, including Vietnam, Cambodia, Sudan, the Horn of Africa, Afghanistan, Iran. And I was a social worker in that area for many years, 9 years in fact, and I worked primarily with young people and their families. The overwhelming majority of my clientele were young people of colour from those varying different countries and backgrounds. And I was also surrounded by people in my workplace who were from these countries as well as white people such as myself. And so for 9 years, I was immersed in a world that was incredibly diverse in race, culture, religion, beliefs. And I loved that work so very, very much. Now, after giving you that background, I'm going to skip forward a bit because I know many of you have heard the story about how I eventually left that profession and found coaching and started my own business, firstly as a private counsellor, following on from that work, and then eventually moving into full-time coaching, and then founding the Beautiful You Coaching Academy. And I fast forward to a time about 7 years ago now, when we were, as an academy, hosting an Inspiration Day in San Francisco. There were 32 people that were present at that day. Partway through the day, I was standing to the side of the room, and this is the part, Ketsi, that answers your question about when did I realise or what called me to look at this work deeper. And this was this moment, and it's a moment that I will never forget. I was standing to the side of the room watching the speaker speak to our trainees and alumni on that day. And I turned my gaze to look towards those people the audience that were there. And as I did so and was casting my eye around the room, I noticed that there was only one black woman that was sitting in the audience, and there were no other people of colour that were sitting in that audience. And it was like time stopped for me in that moment. And it was a feeling of a combination of, that terrible feeling that you get, like an awful butterfly flip or in your stomach. Not in a good, I think I'm falling in love with this person sort of way, but in a, gosh, I feel like somebody's just punched me in the tummy sort of way. My heart felt like it sank. I swallowed hard, and I was just struck instantly by that fact, and that meant that we had a problem. And when I say we, I primarily also, of course, mean and knew in that moment that meant me, because I was the person that was leading up the co-creation of this community. And so obviously I had to get on with the rest of the day, which I did, and it was a beautiful and wonderful day. But from then on, occupied in my mind significantly was the fact that we had become and were incredibly white-centric, and that this was an issue and a problem because Black, Brown, Indigenous and people of colour of all cultures, races and creeds, of course, have so much to offer this industry. There are many practices that originate from varying different cultures that we use and call upon and rely upon as coaches and in the coaching industry, and that it was unacceptable that was the case when I looked out at that audience. There was something clearly very, very wrong. And it took me, which again is a problem, was a problem, to visually see that, to recognize it. Now, the fact that I did not recognize it, and I'm confessing this here today because there's no point hiding it, was an issue. That was a problem, and that began with me. That started with me. And if there's one thing that I feel okay about that I did right at that time, because clearly I had done many things wrong to create that situation in the first place, is I got over that initial feeling of the gut punch and the heart sink and the panic in a way, to just kind of settle myself and realize that I knew intelligently enough or cerebrally enough, I knew that this was not going to be fixed with Band-Aid solutions, that this was a problem that had been churning away for many, many years, and that I needed to get help. My intuition was telling me, you can't do this on your own. You've created this, but you now need to get help. There is some unpacking here to do. There is clearly some bias. There is your own racism. There is your own whiteness, your own need to decolonize that is presenting itself here, Julie. You have to get help to be able to work through this. And as I began to research, which did not take a couple of days, it took a long time, I began searching for people that may be able to help me look at this. Social justice educators, anti-racism educators. And over the time and the years, I've worked with many of those and exposed our coaches to many of those as well. But the primary ones that I found most aligned with what I felt were my values and the need that I had at that time were three brilliant women by the name of Desiree Adaway, Erica Hines and Jessica Fish. And I found their work as anti-racism educators and social justice educators, and they had offerings of both programs and private consultancy to be able to support people, particularly those who were business owners, look at their businesses and really work out how they could be more just, more equitable, more diverse, more inclusive. And so began my work with them. And that was both life-changing and business-changing in so many different ways. And Erica, Desiree and Jessica helped me to realise that the very first thing that I needed to do before looking at anything to do with the Academy was to look at myself and to unravel why it is that, despite the fact that I had had many years at university surrounded by brilliant people of colour, that I had friends who were people of colour, that I had worked both with and for, in service of, many different people from different backgrounds, somehow or another, I had taken on a belief or a narrative unconsciously that in starting my own business, that those people were somehow or another either not welcome or not seen or not valued by me enough to consciously include them in everything that I did in my business. And so, as you can imagine, this was not easy work. This involved a lot of me needing to reconcile with some not great things about myself. And it was hard and challenging work, as it needs to be if it's going to come out the other side with any level of impact. It involved needing to lower defenses, open myself up to my bias, my mistakes, my whiteness, all the things I've mentioned and a lot more. And those three women were absolutely life-changingly profound and amazing in how they held me as I moved through that. And the shame and the guilt and the need to reconcile everything I needed to reconcile to begin to then consciously make changes. They helped me to understand that this was not an individual failing of mine, but rather that I was a person that, growing up in a white supremacy laden world, had believed everything about that system of oppression, whether consciously or unconsciously, about my role in the world. And the unpacking of that and moving through that was what then allowed me, I believe, to not only get to the point where we began to make changes with the Academy, but also now sees me 7+ years later, still incredibly passionate, driven and committed to DEI, diversity, equity and inclusion and social justice work, and will be forever, ongoing in every possible way. So there's not enough time for me to go into all of the personal things that I had to do, but there was a lot, and I'm so grateful for that time. And it eventually moved into a place where we were able to, together with those amazing educators and also many others since then, including Trudy Lebron, Annie Gisharu, Dr. Janara Gereng, and I know there will be many more in the future, begin to look at things such as the strengthening of our scholarship program, how we could make our teachings and education more inclusive, how it is that we could better support, elevate, attract, honour coaches who were Black, Brown, Indigenous and people of colour in varying different ways, to become a space that, and an academy and a business that was welcoming in very overt ways. And that is essentially the work that we continue to do as much as we possibly can, and also simultaneously recognize alongside of that we have an obligation, what I believe is an obligation, to speak up and out about issues in the world that coaches and the coaching industry are connected to. Issues of injustice, of racism, homophobia, transphobia, ableism, white supremacy, fat phobia, and more. And we do that alongside, of course, understanding that we're not social justice educators, that we're not anti-racism educators, but we do stand for anti-racism. We do stand for social justice issues. And so you will see us speak about such things on social media and in our work at varying different times. We are not afraid in our trainings, in our spaces, to hold and have conversations about these matters. I fully recognise and understand that not everybody agrees that we should do that not everybody agrees with the way that we do that, and that in many ways it is probably seen by some, maybe even many, to be woefully inadequate. And I understand and appreciate and take on board those perspectives. But we do what we believe is right and apt for the issues that we know affect the personal development industry, the coaching industry, and the lived experience of our own coaches. It's really important for me to say that in us doing this work, and now what I hope to be a training academy that is more welcoming to people of all different cultures, races, religions, body types, shapes, abilities, neurodiversities, and so many other things, that we are not a shining example of perfection or even greatness in the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We are committed, we are invested, we try our best, but I'm not here to say that we get it right all the time, or, as I just mentioned, that we are a shining example in any significant way. We are doing what I now have come to understand really is the bare minimum to ensure, not consciously, but the bare minimum from the perspective that there always could be more and will be more that we could do. And we're going to strive for that and try for that the best that we can. But this is never-ending work. The work of making sure that the coaching industry is not as white-centric as it currently is, that it is accepting of people of all backgrounds, that it is inclusive, that it tries to create brave, trauma-informed spaces where people can bring their varying lived experiences to their work and know with us that while we can never guarantee safety, because I don't believe that anyone can ever fully guarantee that, we can guarantee brave spaces, that we will see people, that we will honour them as much as we humanly possibly can in their lived experiences, is work that goes on forever. And it is work that will always be, in some form or another, imperfect. But we try, we are committed. This is work that will never end for us in attempting to try and make coaching and the coaching industry as diverse, accepting, and rich in differences as we possibly can. In doing so, we not only support us as coaches in the coaching industry, but we support those people who access us and want to work with coaches as well. Ketsi, there is just so much that I could say about this topic, but really, if I'm being honest, I'm not the best person to do that as a white woman. I can only speak to my personal experience, and I know that that's what your question was today. And I honor you as a Black woman asking me this question and really opening me up and placing me in a position of needing to be fully honest with you, to say that the calling to this work came through a problem, and that problem was me. It didn't happen because of riots in Charlottesville or the murder of George Floyd or the recent genocide in Palestine or any other particular world or global issue. All of those things of which have happened since the time that I came into this work further, realizing that I had taken on, as I mentioned before, that story or that narrative that my business was just a business and it didn't have or have to have a commitment or obligation to diversity, equity, inclusion, because it wasn't something that was even in my mindset when I started it to begin with. And that was clearly an issue that rested with me. The calling to this came on that day in San Francisco when I looked out at that room and got that gut punch and realized I had created a problem. I was the problem. And the business that I had, the academy that I had, was feeding into a white-centric coaching industry. I am so grateful. Oh, boy, am I so grateful for that wake-up call that happened on that day. We have never had a room look like that since. That is not something that I or we should be applauded for. Again, it is bare minimum, and it should have been the way that it was all along. I am now more, I'm not going to say proud, because it's not, I don't believe it's something to be proud of when you're just meeting bare minimum. I am now glad that since that time, we have begun significantly to attract more people of varying different races, cultures, backgrounds, and all the different types of folks with varying different lived experiences that I mentioned before. Very, very glad for that. What they bring to us in the coaching industry is so needed, so necessary, and I really feel called to apologize in many ways that in our early years, my failing, which it was my failing, was not cognizant of the fact that we were so white-centric and that I did not do enough to welcome those people into our work. And that's a fact, and I have to own that. The work that I've done has helped me move beyond the guilt, move beyond the shame, because it's when white folk remain in guilt or remain in shame or remain in fear that we don't continue to do this work that is so necessary. So I'm not going to wallow in that. I'm not going to cloak myself in it. I'm going to say I made a mistake. I didn't do enough. And that I'm committed and have been committed now for 7+ years to changing that, and will remain committed for life. We continue to do lots of varying different things in this space, and again, will commit to doing that ongoing. I'm not going to go into all the ways that we do that. Maybe that's a question for another time. It feels like, I don't want to sit here and kind of tick the box and say, but this is now what we're doing, and all of these kinds of things, as in like, here are the things that we've done in some kind of aren't we amazing way. That's not what I want to get across. It's like, we do this work because it's right and because it should have been done all along. And even though it wasn't, I'm so very glad that we're doing it now. Ketsi, thank you for this wonderful question. Thank you, as I said, for opening me up and telling this story, which I have never told publicly before. I've had people ask us about our DEI work, but never personally of me. Where was I called? How was I called? How did this happen? How did it start? And so thank you for asking it and taking me there. And just thank you, I think, is what I want to say, because these discussions are important and they're necessary. And I'm grateful to you for raising this topic and starting out our 2024 year with a really deep, rich Coach's Couch. Thank you so much to everyone for listening and for being here. Wishing you many blessings for the year ahead, and so grateful to have you here in 2024 listening to Inspired Coach and all of the beautiful episodes that we have coming ahead for you.